Hey, all you Ethicuties and the 40% who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to our special healthcare edition. Little mix up with the platform before, so the replay will be available. Glad you guys could make it. We got a great episode for you today. We're going to be talking about elevating compliance. So we have the one and only Ross Ronan. Ross, welcome back to the Ethicsverse. Glad to have you here, man.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
Couple of quick announcements. Ethico is like the compliance, the healthcare compliance company. So we want to, give some resources to healthcare in particular. So we're going to start doing episodes like this. We'd love to hear from you guys. If you can drop in the chat some topics that you would like to get covered. We want to be able to dive deep and, of course, take very seriously the hour you spend with us each week. Maybe it'll turn into 2 hours each week. Okay, so hit us on that Ethico survey or that Ethicsverse survey if you like. There's a lot of social media people that you should be following. There's a lot of thought leadership coming out. We got a great thought leader on here today. He has a podcast, Ross Ronan's podcast, called the Compliance Leadership Lounge. It's really phenomenal. That should absolutely be in your rotation. How often are those episodes coming out, Ross?
We do about one every month or so. I think we're getting into the more of every 2 weeks if we can. But we're really trying to get a lot of play and get a lot of good leadership on those podcasts. We can talk about, how to lead organizations and how to talk to board members and how board members want to receive their information from compliance professionals.
Well, you're a master at that, so I would really encourage you to check that out. The back episodes are phenomenal. So hit that scan here, and you can also see the list of books. A couple of quick announcements. The Ethics Experts' most recent episode with Olaf Kaspersen is phenomenal. You'll like that one a lot. I think he may have been watching some of your podcasts because a lot of what you talk about, he talks about as well. FCPA Survival Guide is phenomenal as well, if I do say so myself. I'm actually more of a fly on the wall. This is Tom Fox's brainchild, so check those out if you like. Also, if anybody's coming to CEI next week, we got a killer party on Monday. We have our booth is going to be, of course, the no pitch zone booth. So if you're sick of getting pitched at all those other booths, swing by ours, take a load off, check out a book, do an interview. We're going to be doing a mini documentary as well. But hope you guys can make that. It's going to be in Texas next week. I want to share quickly the Middle Managers Toolkit. So if you haven't downloaded this and you haven't checked this out yet, I'd encourage you to do it. It's really chock full of a ton of different resources that you can leverage to drive more participation in your organization. The battleground that we're facing right now in terms of enterprise-wide participation in the risk management apparatus that ethics, compliance, human resources is really engaging those middle managers. That has been this last mile, as I call it, has been a difficult one for a lot of us to actualize and get those people singing from the same song sheet. So check out this Middle Managers Toolkit. A lot of great resources in there for you. There's even a slide deck that you can download. It's already built for you. You can add your logo, change some of the verbiage if you like. And you can, get those guys trained up. Drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat. We say this all the time. Your network is your net worth, particularly in healthcare. We're going to be talking a lot today about how a lot of us in ethics and compliance, we don't want to raise our hand. We don't want to ask for help because we think that we should have all the answers. That couldn't be further from the truth. And I think once we kind of get over that fear, it really opens up a lot of opportunity for us to, again, magnify our impact in our organization. So connect with at least one person today. Our clients love us due to our outcomes, the outcomes that they're able to get with us. So if you feel like you're running in the mud in ski boots and you'd like to see a new tool, a next-gen tool that can really be this enterprise-wide disclosure tool to crowdsource this risk intelligence at scale, hit us up on ethico.com and we can get you a no pitch zone demo. And here's our commitment to quality. So what a lot of people don't know is that Ethico was founded by healthcare compliance, healthcare consultants to the healthcare industry. This is back in the 90s. And their commitment to quality, because they were sitting in a fractional seat, really is still kind of a foundation throughout our organization. So everybody, for example, who runs our call center, our intake center is CCEP certified. We end up spending about twice as long on the phone with a real kind of humanized approach that allows us to get much better information on behalf of our clients so they can hit the ground running with their investigation. So again, if you're interested or you're sick of the status quo, we stand by ready to perhaps partner with you if it makes sense for your organization. As always, world famous book giveaway is in full effect. We're giving away Fearless Organization, The Fearless Organization by the one and only Amy Edmondson. So keep those comments coming in the chat, keep your questions coming, and we're going to be working those in, the most active folks. And also, here's a little bonus because this is our first healthcare edition. So if you want to share our post about it or you want to talk about it, tag at Ethico and you'll double your chances to win a book. Who doesn't like free books? You know what I mean? So we're giving away 5 of those today. 1 year of free service, of course, for Ethicsverse members. How you doing? I'm Nick. Look at this cool new avatar. I'm feeling so spacey. And the one and only Ross Ronan. Ross runs Ronan Consulting with a healthcare focus, and he has a really phenomenal background. So Ross, welcome. Let's get some emojis coming. We're back on track here. We got everybody here. And let's dive right in. Before we dive in, actually, I want to share this about Ronan Healthcare Consulting. So they have a ton of different services, really phenomenal work. He can come in and coach you. You can check this out. Hit this QR code here or go to the Ronan website, and you can see the whole bouquet of services that they have to offer. They have fractional engagements. They do risk assessments. They do program assessments, everything you can imagine. And as you get to hear Ross today, you're really going to get a taste of the kind of genius that he can bring to your organization. So, Ross, I know you asked me not to gush too hard about you and your business, but I just kind of can't help myself. You know what I mean?
I appreciate that.
All right. So we're going to dive in and we're going to be talking about today about like, how do we elevate compliance in the healthcare space? Like I mentioned in the prelude or in the preview, a lot of us are scared to kind of ask for help. A lot of us are trapped in the prisons of our own mind. And so we're going to be talking about elevating compliance in the organization. How do you elevate your program? How do you change your mindset and your persuasion paths to really get out of our limiting assumptions? And we're going to walk through 3 kind of major areas. We're going to talk about the audit function. We're going to talk about the program itself, and we're going to talk about the mindset. So how can you 10x the impact of your audit function? How can you really unleash the compliance program to really kind of reap the benefits of the full potential? And how do you change your mindset? It's really going to start with mindset. So Ross, before we dive in, you have a really unique background. You've had a lot of really unique positions. You have degrees in nursing and law. So how has the combination of these this diverse background influence your perspective on healthcare compliance?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, by the way, and gushing over what we do. So we appreciate it. Having the whole experience with being a nurse, I was an ICU and ER nurse for many years, really taught me how to critically think and go into situations to say, how do you pinpoint these issues? How do you handle them really quickly? How do you make decisions from that standpoint and really put them into effect? And then double taking, on top of that, going to law school and going through all of that education really taught me how to kind of read regulations and understand them and be able to apply them. Putting those 2 together, I think, was truly the foundation behind kind of creating this ability to be a compliance officer where you can critically think, easily evaluate, and come to a right decision based upon the information that's provided to you. So as a nurse, you look at a patient and you see kind of what they're doing and how they're progressing. And then as a lawyer, you look at it and say, how do the things that I know, the rules that I need to follow, how do they apply? So I'll tell you though, education is essential, but experience is everything. And that's really important because you should get the education that you need. And here's a perfect example, right? So, moving on from being a nurse and going into compliance, I get a call from one of my really good friends who was a lawyer, and she was the assistant general counsel for a hospital system in Dallas, Paige Kessman, and now she works for Tenet. She called me one day and said, hey, by the way, you're about to graduate with your law degree and you're an RN/JD. That's the thing, right? You're cool. It's RN/JD. Hey, why don't you become our compliance officer? And as I'm talking to her, I'm literally, it wasn't, looking it up online, but I think it was like CompuServe or something like that back then. I'm like, what is a compliance officer? I dive right in being a compliance officer right off the bat. And it turned out not great. I progressed up the ladder, but I also, my next job, I actually took as a director of compliance because I realized pretty quickly that my education and training that I received wasn't as important as the experience that I brought to this position. So I actually took a step back on a national level as a director versus a compliance officer to learn from people and learn from the best, so I could grow with the program, I could grow with the position, I could grow with compliance. And it wasn't, just because I was an RNJD doesn't mean that I had all the answers. I had to experience, I had to live it, I had to have successes and failures. And so, like I said, education is essential, and experience is everything. And I'll tell you, when I see people who are coming out of law school or lawyers, hey, I want to get in compliance, or hey, I've got my degree in compliance or risk management, you need to stop, spend some time, experience the things, and that's what's really important to help you build this kind of level of compliance executive versus just having a compliance job.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to get a guy to build my house, I want a guy whose tools are a little beat up. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly right.
A lot of what we're talking about is filling that toolbox with the right tools. And, it's not lost on me your, willingness to sort of quote unquote take that step back or not take that sort of next step from a title perspective. And how can you deconstruct that? What drove you to do it? Is it just the humility of knowing that, hey, there's a lot more I have to learn? Is it saying, hey, I have a goal that in the future I want to be this compliance officer, and so my job right now is really to just stack up, experience and tools? Like, talk to us about what kind of arithmetic or calculus you did in making that sort of step back position, which probably allowed you to kind of shoot forward even more.
It's a little bit of both. And so first you have to make the decision that you are taking a step back. And a lot of people said, what's it going to look like on my resume? How am I going to explain going from a compliance officer to a compliance director position? And how's that going to look on my go forward basis? And what I do is I sat and I looked at it and I said, you know what? I need the experience. I need to get in someplace that is maybe a national company where I can see everything that's coming at me and take a step backwards and go, how do I propel myself to that bigger position? And so that goal was to ultimately be a chief compliance officer, was to be an executive vice president of an organization, not just a chief compliance officer, but I wanted to be an executive of an organization, which I think is above and beyond what most compliance officers can actually see, because they kind of, they'll be maybe associate vice president or vice president level. They hardly ever get to be that executive vice president. So I really wanted to be at that level. And I knew that I had to learn from the people in my industry, and I needed to learn from experience. What happens when you get a corporate integrity agreement? What happens when you're sitting in front of the Department of Justice and the FBI in an investigation for a civil investigative demand? How do you communicate to them? And the only way you do that is by experience and getting it, but really having the humility to take a step back and saying, one step back, 10 steps forward, that's where I need to go.
And I just want to kind of underscore the importance of having vision. Like, you have a vision for what you want your career to be. And when you have that vision, it allows you to not waste time kind of wandering around, hitting a glass ceiling or whatever. So many of us end up, especially in healthcare, we end up falling into this crazy reactionary mode where we're just kind of putting out fires, our hair's on fire, we're a walking hat rack. And sometimes it's hard to lift our head up from, our work in the corner of the world and see am I making progress in my own career? And what I found is that, I love this term, compliance officer versus compliance executive. We'll talk some more about that. But the people that I would characterize as compliance executives, they all seem to have, the through line, the commonality, they all seem to have this vision for what they want their future career to be. And I think just in having that vision, it allows you to be so much more impactful on whatever lily pad you happen to be at the moment, because you're a lot more open to absorbing experiences. You're a lot more open to new experiences to fill that toolbox up. And it allows you to really kind of leverage all the other kind of, historical, skills that you've kind of built in the context of your current job, because you're trying to use that as a springboard for the next thing. There's something interesting that you didn't bring up about your background, but you spent several long seasons as a chief operating officer after compliance. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, because I just think it's kind of germane to what we're talking about, your openness to do that and take on that crazy challenge, which many people I would bet, would have viewed as such a detour. That probably multiplied so much, because now, you can have that executive vice president kind of parlance and kind of sit at the table with those folks. Tell us a little bit about that. And as Ross is answering and throughout the rest of this, I really hope you in the audience can really tune into the mindset, because so much of what we're talking about and so much of the impact that we end up having on the workplace and on the employee base starts with that mindset. So please.
Yeah, no, I did have the fortunate opportunity, and it wasn't ACT for compliant, it was compliance. It was right in the middle of it.
Oh, it was in the middle. Okay.
It's funny because I'm looking at, I do get to see the participants on this list, and one person who used to work with me in my department is on, so I won't name her name because she'll kill me. But she was not very happy when I told her that I was moving to this role in operations. So I did have the ability to get tapped on the shoulder by the CEO of one of the healthcare companies that was under our direction, to say, hey, why don't you come help me I was executive vice president of performance improvement, which was really kind of running the operational pieces of the organization. And I turned the compliance program over to another individual. And it really did allow me to understand the business and all the stuff that I had been doing before, the 10 years that I had been working in the compliance program. What have I put into place as a compliance program to help these operators do what they need to do, to be the best that they can, to excel the business forward? And as I started looking at that, I'm like, oh, that's great. That works for me. Or I'd go back to the compliance officers, hey, we need to change this a little bit because it's not allowing us operationally to do the things we need to do, but I do know kind of the guardrails that we need to do to set them up. So it really helped me become the kind of person, the kind of executive that I wanted to be, right? There's one thing in leaving your dream and saying, I want this title, I want to be over these programs. The other thing about it is, what kind of executive do you want to be? Do you want to be that person who is the strategic person, or do you just want to be that executive who is the CFO, right? And you don't want to be the CFO of the organization. And that's generally what happens when compliance people have that issue. So, eventually I get tapped on the shoulder again as the company grew to say, hey, why don't you come back to the compliance program by the board to help us reorganize it, get bigger and expand. Thank you for your service and operations, but come back here and we'll kind of push you down the next level of being that strategic partner. So it was so valuable to be able to have that. And I'll say I can see a couple of people again on this list that are participating. A lot of these people started in operations, and then they moved to compliance because they were so good at what they did in operations that they're like, golly, can bring it to the next level of compliance. And then using those two pieces together really does help become that compliance executive. So,
I'm sure, I'm projecting now, okay? I'm sure that you were, you thought you knew what that job was going to be. I'm sure you thought it was going to be a challenge, but I'm sure once you got into it and once you were on the front lines in that role, there was probably a lot of light bulb moments. If you could boil those down, what were a couple of those lessons that you found to be super valuable in terms of mobilizing your program or expanding the impact when you switched back to, expanding that compliance function after that ops experience?
I would say that was my trigger to really understand how to become a strategic partner, because let's just say you look at the auditing program for a compliance department, right? And there's a lot of functionality that says, hey, just kind of create this audit program that just audits, and we audit everything, and we take everything and we give all the information to you, and you need to go fix it as a company, right? And as I got into operations, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, look, that's not relevant to me. That's not helpful to me. It doesn't tell me my risks associated. It doesn't tell me how to mitigate it. It doesn't tell me how to fix these problems. So when we started off talking about how to elevate kind of your auditing program within compliance, that was a big thing for me. It's like, how do I give information to operations to A, make things successful, B, decrease the risk that they would have to coding and billing, and how do I create that auditing program to be helpful to them to decline risk, but it also helps them move themselves forward to be a better company. So it's really elevating those programs. It's easy to take the 7 elements, take your checklist and go implement without actually knowing what the methods are for prevention, detection, and mitigation across the board. So it was a big example of modifying that and becoming better steward of the organization versus just the compliance officer, checking the box.
Well, and we talk about this a lot on this show, that it's really kind of small tweaks to our mentality that end up having these outsized impacts, right? Like that light bulb probably transformed how you interacted with the business, particularly in this function and probably across a bunch of other functions. And it wasn't like, you're starting kind of totally over. It's a small tweak. It's some nuance to something that you had in place. It was a slight adjustment to some of those programs and to some of those, policies. We got a great question from Erica. Hey, Erica, what certifications or education would you recommend for novice compliance associates besides coming to every Ethicsverse episode ever? I'm just kidding. I added that at the end. So what kind of education would you recommend for somebody who's really new getting into the space? Certification wise, whatever.
Yeah, HCCA and SCCE from a compliance perspective, I think it's a no-brainer, right? So CHC, CCEPs, the privacy certifications, all of them are so important to be able to have that. And I'll tell you why, because I hear this a lot, and I'll, full transparency, Nick, I resisted the certifications in compliance for a long time. Right. I've been in this for 10 years or so. And I'm like, you know what? I don't need this. I've done it. I've lived it. I've done it all. I don't need the HCCA. I don't need these people telling me I'm okay just because of the certification. And then I realized that it's not necessarily about the certifications, because you take your stuff, you can go to the workshop and you can have your CHC in a day or something, right? But what I'll tell you is it shows your commitment to compliance, and it shows the commitment to the profession, to what we do here. And that is really important to be able to have that as a knowledge base to understand, but also to show that you're committed to this essentially profession that you've decided to go. So as a new person, understand that's your baseline. Are they going to teach you everything you know? Absolutely not. But when we hire people for our clients, it's a requirement. It's a requirement that you have. That means you've taken time, you've committed to compliance. And then there's some other ones that are out there, like degrees. Those are great. I wouldn't say that they're necessary, but they definitely, I would start out with the HCCAs and the SCCE certifications.
Yeah, Angela just kind of echoed that. She said, I feel like getting my CHC gave me the credibility I needed with my peers. It's right next to your name. And again, it shows that you have this commitment and you're at least starting from a point of okay, this person might know what they're talking about. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about
certified medical professional or certified medical executive through MGMA. And so that's something that interesting too. So if there is other kind of certifications that you can get in your industry that shows you understand the business as well as compliance, I think that takes you to the next level as well. I'm not talking about an MBA. I'm talking about, MGMA certifications or surgical certifications or something like that. It also shows not only are you compliance oriented, you understand the business.
I'm going to say something here and I'd like you to push back on it if you disagree. Okay. I think those certifications are great for all the reasons you said, but I think the rubber meets the road and your reputation in your organization is not going to go that far beyond that certification, right? Like your reputation is going to be your performance and how you actually perform, quote unquote, in your interactions with folks. And so that's a great sort of leg up. It definitely conveys a lot of information, but at the end of the day, it's the day-to-day interactions you have with the other executives in the organization, the other leaders, and your business prowess, your understanding of the organization, your understanding of the organization's mission. People are looking for confirmation of that. And so you might get kind of some extra points. And I'm not saying obviously don't do it. I'm saying absolutely do it, but make sure you're not resting, you're not resting on those laurels. Make sure that performance is up to snuff, so to speak, because that's how you can maintain that credibility.
I totally agree. And just to echo that a little bit more, it gets you in the door. And I'm so glad this question was a beginning compliance person, not an established compliance person. So I think it gets you in the door. Here's another kind of piece to that too. Not every lawyer is a good compliance officer. And I used to talk to compliance executives and compliance officers too, say, I need to go to law school, or I need to get my degree in law, or I need to get something like this. Guess what? I've met more people who have their law degree or who used to be lawyers that are the absolute worst compliance officers known to man. And so just because you have it doesn't mean you're going to be good. Just because you have the certifications doesn't mean you're going to be good. You have to have the right mindset, and you have to determine what kind of compliance executive you want to be versus what am I just trained to do based upon my certifications. So
that's a great point. Yeah, the certification is not the end all be all. Whether it's a law degree or whatever. But, you just talked about mindset. And I think like there's a root of, again, I paint in broad brushstrokes. So I'm just saying archetypally, it seems like there's a reluctance among compliance officers to like ask for help. How do you help your clients, or what would you tell the audience in terms of like changing their mindset so that they can unleash and kind of break out of this prison that they've built for themselves?
It's so funny because we have this mindset as compliance officers, and it comes from our history, to be honest, right? So let's take a general counsel, for example, right? General counsels have been around for 200 plus years, right? Starting the Civil War, everything else, like many years ago, general in-house counsels have been around, right? Compliance, if you really boil down to the bare essence of the Federal Sentencing Guidelines, which came out in the mid-91, 92-ish, but healthcare compliance only came around in the late 90s. So it's only about 25, 26 years old. And if there's ever a person who comes up and says, yeah, I've been 30 years in compliance, they're full of it. I'm telling you, because it hasn't been around that long in healthcare. And I don't even say that because I haven't been. But, someone told me the other day I was a Gen 1er in compliance. And it's funny because I think I started in 2003, which is right after the guidelines came out, but for healthcare. But anyways, So legal departments have been around forever, and legal departments do not have a problem. The general counsels, the in-house counsel, have no problem having a lawyer on speed dial that's an outside counsel. They have a problem, they have a concern, need some guidance. They pick up the phone. They have an employment issue, they have a HR issue. They can pick them up and they can get guidance from them, and no one questions whatsoever. There's a line item for outside counsel in every lawyer's in-house counsel budget. I've been there. I've understood it, right? There's not for a compliance officer. There's nothing in a compliance officer's budget that says, here's your guidance, here's your help to go out and answer these questions. And I think it's because compliance officers have not been advocating for things like this. They don't get to go to their CEOs and say, hey, by the way, I need a line item to be able to say, who is a compliance expert that I need to be able to bounce this off of? That's not a lawyer. That's really a compliance person, right? I need to be able to have that kind of resource to provide this support and the information to you as a company, you as a CEO, so that I can be the best version of me as your compliance executive that you need. And I think it's really because we have this perspective that we have to know everything. And if we don't know it, we always defer to the general counsel, right? Because they've got other resources. And when the compliance officer positions came out, they were obviously all predicated by the Federal Sentencing Guidelines and the OIG guidance in healthcare. It's this nebulous term of compliance officer. I mean, you're not a policeman. You're not an officer of the company, right? And so there's this pushback of saying you're not an officer, but you have this officer role, and we don't want to give you that kind of credibility. We have to stop thinking we're officers of the company. We have to start thinking we're executives, and we have to have a conversation with our leadership to say, if you want the best compliance program that can possibly be, give me the resources to be able to have that kind of information coming in through outside consultants, through outside people who've done this for years, from mentors and coaches and things like that, so I can be the best person for you as a compliance executive.
I mean, it's such a phenomenal point you made, because guess what? Every other department has these outside resources. Sales has outside counsel, quote unquote. They have sales consultants that come in. Marketing does the same thing. Tech has the same thing. Like literally every, I mean, in the manufacturing setting, you have quality consultants that can come in, or consultants that can come in and help you rearrange your plant to have more throughput. Like literally every other department has these resources that are, it's not like some crazy thing to say, hey, I think we should get a consultant in here, or we should get some outside help. And I think part of it, to your point, is, I love this mindset conversation because I just think it's the root of the tree. We have to get that root right if the fruit is going to be, edible and going to be, feeding the people, so to speak. If we think, yes, we're a cost center, if we think I need to have all the answers, those are all very limiting beliefs. That's a very fixed mindset. And it's really kind of a self-preservation type of a mindset. If we have an algorithm running in our sort of mental RAM on self-preservation that's too much, well, then that's going to start to compromise what our impact can be. And so, everybody in my company seems to feel comfortable coming in and saying, hey, I think we need some help. And, they've been trained or they understand to tie that to the mission to help me see how this might get something unlocked in pursuit of our organizational mission. And it's usually a lot easier than people think. Like I've heard that multiple times. Oh, this was easier than I think. Like either you're adding value or you're not. Either compliance is a function that is necessary or it isn't. And if it isn't, then, get a new career. I think it is. I think it's super critical. I think it's tied to quality. It's tied to business success. I mean, there's so many externalities that come from a compliant organization that has a strong culture of integrity, but we need to believe that. We need to be able to stand on that because that's a strong foundation and that should give us confidence to get what we need to solve for the outcome. The outcome is not keeping your job. The outcome is not proving how busy I am from all the different things I'm doing. The outcome is a better organization. It's, better bottom line, lower turnover, higher employee engagement, less risk of fine, on and on and on. We have a great question here from Stephanie. Stephanie, thanks for this question. How do you navigate the profession with individuals that believe that compliance officers need to let operations ride the guardrails at the expense of ethics and compliance without being the CF-No? Great question, Stephanie. Thank you for that.
Well, it depends on what you mean by ride the guardrails. I do think that there are, and this is what I tell my clients, and this is what I told my businesses when I ran them in the compliance department. There are guardrails that we set up as compliance programs, right? And it depends on how narrow or wide you want to make them, but as wide as they are means that you're complying with the regulation. The narrower that you want them as a maybe risk-averse type of compliance officer, you're going to get a lot of pushback from an operational perspective. There's a lot of gray areas in being able to do certain things within the business and within operations. The fact that you can did I lose your neck? Oh, there we go.
Back.
Sorry,
I just need a little angle change,
I appreciate that. I just didn't know if I went dark or not. So when you look at it, Stephanie, you have to understand what your guardrails need to be and have a conversations with your operational folks to say, hey, what do you need to get done? Right? And I think that's how you become a strategic partner and not the CF-No, is you have a conversations. You say, hey, are you asking this because you want compliance to push this down and say no, which there's problems with that too, or are you saying I need to do this? How do I get there? And then you work with that individual to say this is how we need to get there within the parameters that the law allows and allows you to be successful. That's the conversation that you have with operations. Once you start saying no, 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 can't do, they're going to turn you off, right? They're going to say, I don't want to hear you anymore. You're not here to help me. You're here to stop me. And once you say you're here to stop me, they're deaf to you. They're blind. I mean, they're not going to listen to you at all. So you start with the question of saying, where do you want to be? What do you want to get to? Now, if they come to you and say, hey, I want to give brown bags of money to all the referral sources so that I get all the money that I can build Medicare, the answer is no. I'm sorry.
That's a hard no. Okay, that's an easy one.
That's a hard no, right? That's over. You flipped over the guardrail, right? And we don't want that. We want to say, where do you want to be? Understand, you need more patients to come in. So compliance-wise, what should you be able to do from a marketing perspective? Here's your message that should be there. You're not focusing on one individual. You're not focusing on one payer. You're not focusing on this, but you're saying these are good quality of care that I'm bringing to the table. This is how I need to do it. Great, thanks. We'll monitor it, make sure no one's giving kickbacks and make sure no one's doing anything wrong. And we'll have a policy that says you can't do all those other things. So that's really how you do it. You have the conversation, you sit down and you talk to them a little bit. So, hey, Nick, I do want to follow up on the other question that you stated before, because I do think that as a cost center, we're all cost centers associated with compliance, legal, HR, whatever it may be. I think compliance officers and those that are running compliance programs are living with a stigma. They know a CEO, or they work for a CEO that had the kind of compliance officer that said, I need to come in and I need to build a fiefdom. OIG sentencing guidelines, or the federal sentencing guidelines, the OIG guidelines, the DOJ guidelines, they all come out and say, do you get enough resources to do your job? And they all know a compliance officer said, I need 4 auditors, I need this person, I need this person, I need this person, I need $3 million budget, and this is what I need to do. That's not what that's not what a compliance executive does, right? A compliance executive comes in and says, I can resource this thing with outside, resources. I can resources it with little amount of human resource because I have good processes. I have things in place. I'm a steward of your money, but I'm also making sure that I get the job done. And we've all had this kind of compliance officer. We all know this person who come in and they're like, I supervise 12 people or 15 people in my compliance program, therefore I am good. And that is not true. If you're supervising 1 or 2 and you lead an effective compliance program and you have $8 billion of revenue and you're able to detect, mitigate, and prevent, that's the kind of compliance executive that the people need because you're a steward of the company and you're not abusing their resources. So I think that's really important to understand that it takes a very mature type of compliance executive to understand that people are not value, expenses are not value, high budgets are not value to the organization. What you do and the processes you bring and the problems you solve are the best thing.
See, this is why I was so excited to have you on, because that's exactly right. Our power does not come from the number of people that we're over or the size of the budget. That's actually a very risky bet, by the way. If you just have a big line item on the P&L and you don't have the relational equity, you don't have the reputation of being a business enabler, you're super vulnerable. And that is such a false sense of security. To your point, there's this concept of explicit and implicit power. And a lot of us think well, power is going to come when I get that title. I guarantee you my title means nothing. People don't have to listen to me. Don't get any ideas. They voluntarily do it. So if we shift our focus not from getting some title or getting some fiefdom, as you called it, but rather making an actual impact in the business and establishing those relationships and building up a reputation of business competence, then the odds of folks coming to us when there's an issue is way higher versus them steering around us because they're this person doesn't get it. I live in the realities of the front line and they're back in the command tent pushing troops around a map. They kind of don't get it. That is an extremely vulnerable position that I see a lot of people fall into because it's natural, right? It's natural. You look out at marketing, you look at these other departments, you see these people that have power, and you naturally kind of associate the size of their organization to their power, when in actuality, their true power is tied to the impact in the business, the relationships that they have. It's a slight shift, but it's actually a really empowering shift because we all can do that. We all can speak English. We all can reach out and Slack somebody or set up a meeting with somebody and really try to understand and tap into that natural empathy we have, really understand what the realities of their day-to-day are like. And then we can apply how we might be able to help unleash them.
I had this podcast just did, and it's my former CEO, and now he's chairman of the board of a lot of different companies, Bill Sanger. I encourage everybody to go listen to it. It's one of our best ones from my standpoint. And one thing he said to me in the middle of this was, hey, Ross, I didn't really ever kind of consider you as a compliance guy. I considered you as a business, confidant, colleague here, but you just did compliance. And I think from my standpoint, that was kind of the biggest kind of acceptance piece that I could ever hear from this man. And that's what I spent my career working towards. That's what becomes a compliance executive instead of a compliance officer, is when the CEO can look at you and go, oh yeah, I know you do compliance, but you understand this business, you understand where we need to get, and you understand how to get there within the regulations. Now, if you can have a company that you're working for that is just bad and doesn't want to comply with the regulations, you should get out. If that is the case, let them self-destruct. But on the other side of it, if they believe in you and they believe it, they should see you as a business person first in compliance. That just does a lot of compliance work.
So Ross, I don't know if it's too late to get you on the ballot, but Stephanie said Ronan 2024. So if you need a VP, buddy, I think we might be able to take this thing.
Yeah. It's hard.
Okay, I got another question here from Janelle. So Janelle says, thanks for this question, Janelle. Janelle says, I work in risk management which interacts with compliance and quality closely. I have been in the risk role for 3 years with my BSN and now my MBA. I'm working on my CPHRM. How is the best way to decide what my best next steps are within the company, or consider kind of stepping out into another role? How would you answer that? How would you advise, Janelle on that?
Well, Janelle, you're talking to the right person. So part of my history is between nursing and law school. I was risk manager for UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas for about 2.5 years. So I understand you. I believe you. I was certified in risk management as well. So I fully understand that perspective. Additionally, in my last job, we dissolved the risk management profile and took on all of risk management for the organization under the compliance umbrella. And this individual who used to work with me, who's on this podcast, was responsible for that entire program. So we moved her from compliance into this head of risk management piece of it. So, and we were also under corporate integrity agreement at the time. And if anybody knows what a corporate integrity agreement says, it says the compliance officer shall not be responsible for any other function other than being compliance. And I had a conversation with our monitor in the OIG, and I said, hey, look, we want to do this. We want to be responsible for this because there is a natural overlap between risk management and compliance because they do affect each other. Bad risk management can affect compliance, and bad compliance can affect risk management from that perspective. So I believe that anybody who's in risk management, started in risk management, wants to move to risk management, that has a compliance background, you got a nursing background, that's great. As a BSN, you understand what it takes on a medical perspective. But if you want to transition into this, and by the way, this person who used to run the risk management program underneath me is now the chief compliance officer for a huge medical practice management group right now. So she's kind of done both. And from the standpoint, you can do whatever you want to. And I think that basis behind doing risk management flows nicely into compliance, or you can continue on down that road with that kind of a dual role to be able to do it, because I think it does affect each other. And by the way, my conversation with the OIG was absolutely, it overlaps, and we would love for you to be able to take on risk management too, because it has a better effect from compliance and making sure you don't violate rules and regulations and provide good quality care.
But how many people just stop at those words on the page and say, well, I can't do it? Like, again, the mindset is, what is the best thing? The best thing is to put this up underneath. And it's not that hard to convince the reasonable person at the OIG that, like, yes, this is together. So again, like, all these documents, all this guidance, they're all principle based, and they're not going to capture every nuance of every single business on where some org chart line is or where it isn't. Like, it's outcome focused. So like, it's not that hard to make that case if it is the right case to make.
It is exactly right, Nick. I mean, let's expand on this a little bit, because I think this is so good. And I know we're kind of running out of time, but I think this is the basis and the understanding behind being the next level compliance person. You hit it right on the nose. All these documents, the OIG guidance, the CIAs, all these things prescribe what you can and can't do, right? And a compliance executive looks at these things and says, A, is it reasonable? B, is it not reasonable? A, if there's somewhere in the between, what is my argument? What is my defense? What is my counter argument to having this thing, right? And one is, thou shalt not do anything else but compliance. And I said, they work together. Now, if you ask me to run the coding department, or if you ask me to run operations at the same time, I'd say I may have a conflict of interest. The other thing is this whole thing about reporting obligations, right? The reporting, how do you report as a compliance officer? And the OIG's doubled down on this with their 2023 guidance and came out, and I sat and listened to Amanda Copsey, who I know very well, and Laura Ellis talk about this. And I said, and I still advise my clients this way. I'm like, it's okay that the compliance officer reports to the general counsel. It's okay. They say don't do it. Every guidance says don't do it. But I say, okay, fine. But don't, if that person's putting a thumb on you, and not allowing you to report things up, that's a problem. But if they're like, administratively, I need to report to that person because administratively CEO can't have 12 people reporting to them. Okay, great. But I want to be able to pick up the phone and call the CEO if I need to. I want to be able to pick up the phone and call the board of directors if I need to. And if that is the okay, that's the guardrails. That's the thing that you put into place. Exactly. You're fine. And I've had this conversation with the OIG on numerous occasions because at one point in time in my career, I did report to the OIG under a CIA. And I called up and I said, he's great. I have direct access to the board. I report to them every quarter. I talk to the CEO on a regular basis. He signs my paycheck. He authorizes my PTO. We kind of hit things back and forth off of each other. But guess what? This is what I'm going to do. And they go, thank you. But a lot of compliance officers come in and go, no, CEO, I will not do that.
I mean, it's such low level thinking. It's really such low level thinking. Like, our job is to apply common sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have a background. We understand what the regulations are, what the risks are for our particular business. We need to have common sense solutions that drive the outcomes that are necessary. And like, I've talked to hundreds of compliance officers between the podcast and, you know, the Ethicsverse and everything else. And anybody who talks about, you know, anybody who's had success with a regulator in navigating through a CIA or whatever, they have tons of stories of like, hey, I don't think this guidance you guys put out made a lot of sense. In our case, X, Y, and Z makes a lot more sense. And they like almost inevitably get the, you know, the approval or whatever, because again, they're trying to get an outcome. They're trying to get a change to actually be driven. And there's no document that is like readable or consumable that can account for every single possible nuance of every single, you know, business, possible reporting structure, industry, whatever. It's our job to interpret that. And it's our job, frankly, to move the world to get the outcome that we need.
That's the next level. That's the next level stuff. And if you want to be at the next level in compliance, and you know, we at Ronan and myself, we have made a commitment here to change this industry. And I want people to be better. I want them to be compliance executives. I want them to go, I'm interpreting this regulation. I'm interpreting this guidance. I'm putting my own stamp on it. It's still compliant. And I'm not afraid to have a conversation with the OIG or the DOJ when it comes to things like this. And I think this is so important for us to have that kind of mentality. But I will tell you, it takes a level of sophistication to be able to do it.
Yeah, and confidence. And like shedding the fixed mindset that we all have from time to time, because, you know, we're human beings. I love this from Christine. Christine said, I go to my department quarterly and ask, what would make life better in this area? Then I do all I can to make it happen. It builds confidence when I turn around and ask for help with compliance projects. Talk to us a little bit about that, you know, particularly in the context, you know, the premise for today is how do we elevate compliance? And, you know, that's a great strategy to kind of change that profile and elevate that function, build some more credibility, build some like deeper relationships. What else would you know, please respond to that and talk to us a little bit more about how do we, you know, elevate that profile and perceived value of the compliance work?
You know, collaboration with other programs, departments, whether it's HR, legal, operations, finance, whatever it may be, is key to being proactive and not reactive. And that's where the compliance functionality needs to be, is on this, you know, prevention, detection, and mitigation pieces of it, not just figuring out how to fix something when something is brought to us. If you're sitting back and waiting for things to happen, you're a reactive compliance program and you're doing nothing but sitting there waiting for something to happen. Going out and having conversations and being collaborative with operations or other departments is key to elevating the compliance program as a strategic partner to say, this is what I need to be, this is what I need to do. And it takes a certain level of compliance executive to be able to have that conversation with the head of HR, with the COO, and say, what can we do to help you move to the next level and go down this road? So, Christine, I think that's perfect that you do that. And that's the way that you're going to be seen as a high-level compliance leader that is bringing something to the table. You're not just a cost center, and you're not just sitting back waiting for things to happen. I hear it all the time. You don't do anything, just sit over there until I call you. And that is the single worst place you can be as a compliance program.
Yeah, and like if you find yourself in that place, I think the most freeing mentality you can have is to like pull the responsibility into yourself and say, I've done something to create this. That might feel a little bit scary, and that might be, you know, that kind of hurts you right in the tummy a little. But once you get over that, now you can start to take hold of that steering wheel of your career and take hold of the steering wheel of your reputation, frankly, and start doing some small things to change it. Like, none of this stuff is etched in stone. Your reputation's not etched in stone. The brand of compliance in your organization's not etched in stone. It's just the accumulation of like all these opinions, and all those opinions can be changed, but it needs to be changed with something different. You have to, have a different type of an interaction. Patricia has a really phenomenal question here. And I think this is going to be right up your alley, Ross. So she said, thanks for this comment, Patricia. Working with an organization that struggles with documentation, everything from solid personnel files to quality client documentation. The work needed to get this into compliance is very heavy lift that the organization is not ready to take on. Short of offering to help or letting them get eaten by an outside auditor, how do I demonstrate the importance of working in/on compliance? And this is a great segue into really 10xing our auditing program.
So there's lots of documentation within an organization, whether it's your coding compliance, whether it's your HR files, whether it's your I-9 filings, go down the list of everything. And when you start to compile all of the risk issues associated with lack of documentation, for example, it is exponential, especially if you have an organization that says we don't want to keep documentation on anything, right? So you have Department of Labor issues on wage and hour. You have risk management issues related to care provided. If you're a physician group or whatever, you can't prove that you did good care and you have malpractice claims, which your claims rate will go up, and also your insurance premiums, as well as billing and compliance issues related to False Claims Act or other kind of anti-kickback issues related to contracting. So having a conversation at a very high level with your CEO or with your different department heads to say, look, as an enterprise risk assessment, as we look at this, these are the exposures that you guys would have, that we have as a company, to be able to if something ever comes out. And it's not about if, it's when. It happens. We are in one of the most highly regulated industries in the country. I think we're top 3 highly regulated industries in the country. And it will happen to any kind of healthcare organization, or even if you're not in healthcare, you're in something else that's very highly regulated. So having that conversation to say, look, we need to be less exposed on this documentation standpoint, figure out which ones have the higher exposure, and just take bits and pieces off of this and assist them. A lot of times people will come to me and say, hey, I have this compliance issue. And I'm like, guess what? Not a compliance issue. I know you want to dump it on me, but it's not a compliance issue. But I don't say that. I don't say, hey, it's not a compliance issue, go away. I say, sounds like we need to get some other departments involved. Let's sit down and have a conversation. I'm happy to be a facilitator. I'm happy to draft a policy for you because I know how policies work. Have to create an auditing program to help make sure that we can manage this. But I'm going to do it with you. I'm not going to do it for you. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to assist you. So my best advice to you is to sit down, partner with everybody, see what you can bring to them, i.e. draft a policy, i.e. draft an audit scope for them that lets them be successful while creating their documentation and making sure they're managing good records with the company.
If you don't potty train your kids, you're going to be changing diapers forever. You know what I'm saying? You got to facilitate that a little bit. Thanks for that question. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, I want to dive into this auditing question some more. You've done a great job, not only with your clients, even ones that I know, in helping them, make this auditing function a real kind of a strategic lever in the organization versus just being a drag on, the business. How can somebody get started with that kind of a thing? Because, again, Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to elevate to compliance, executive overnight. You can change your mindset overnight. But how do we start to kind of chip away at that? And how do we set like a good vision for what that function can be in a broader program?
Yeah, so auditing and monitoring, obviously one of the 7 elements of a compliance program, is very important to be able to have it as a compliance functionality. And the idea, though, is you should never audit just to audit. It goes back to the checklist, right, Nick? When we said, hey, this says you must do, you don't need to just check the box and say, yes, I must do this because it says that I can do it. Someone asks you, hey, why are you spending money on this? It says, because it tells me I need to, right? So when you do a scope of audit and you scope of work for an audit, you need to look at it from the standpoint of what am I doing and why am I doing it? right? And if the answer is I'm doing high risk, high utilized codes that's going to provide a risk assessment on the organization to say, where are your risks at and how do I need to improve? How do we need to improve as an organization, whether it's overcoding or undercoding or things like that, then you have to actually put that into place, and that should be part of your scope. If you're just saying we're going to audit everything, and by the way, we have this 50% issue on something that makes $1,000 a year, I would say, okay, you should look at that maybe once or twice a year, but at the end of the day, it's not going to drive, refund all the money and you're out $1,000 and you did it wrong, fix it and go forward. But if you're doing millions and millions of dollars, figure out what you're doing and make sure that we're doing it correctly. Once you start taking a strategic approach to your auditing profile, then you're actually giving meaningful information back to the organization that they can implement on and they can improve. Everybody wants to improve. Everybody wants to do better. And if you're giving them information about wanting to do better as opposed to trying to find an I gotcha moment or, hey, by the way, you were doing this and I got you because I'm a compliance person and you're going to do all these things. That's the wrong mentality. You should go into it saying, how can we improve? How can we identify the risks? It's not an I gotcha moment. We're raising it up to here to make sure that we can prevent and detect, mitigate different issues when it comes to the auditing program. It's just a different mentality. And if you're sitting there going, hey, we should do them quarterly because the OIG tells me that quarterly, I would tell you that if you're doing high risk, high utilized codes and you come back and you have a 96% accuracy level, you don't need to do it every quarter. Don't let the company go through all of that. Do it twice a year and then do focused audits. Right? Yeah,
you don't have a bigger fire at that point? Like there's got to be something else that needs more work than the 96%. You know what I mean?
It's exactly the same thing of I need 12 people that I report to. I got all these people reporting to me. I need to audit every quarter because that's what it says I need to do. It's using your brain. It's using the analysis and saying, this is why, and I can justify it. I can justify why. And when someone asks me, should I do audits every quarter? Should I do them once a year? Should I do them twice a year? My response is, it depends on what your risk tolerance is. If we do them once a year, then you've got 12 months of exposure we have to deal with. If you do them every quarter, you've got 3 months of exposure that we have to deal with. If everything is okay, then I think your exposure is low. That's the kind of conversation that you need to have to elevate the compliance program to the next level to give them the opportunity and the option about what to do for your program.
Again, it's such a subtle shift. Our value is not in our audit plan or our risk assessment. Our value is in the impact that we're having on the business. And it's on us to dictate what that impact is. And it's on us to organize our day and organize our time and organize our program to have that biggest impact. If we are spending our time, this happens on sales teams where it's like, somebody's not hitting their quota, but they're going to hold up and say, well, look at all the phone calls I made. And it's like, well, that's great that you made those phone calls, but at the end of the day, we need this impact. And so if you're having a conversation where you're just like showing a bunch of activities or you're judging your own like value in the organization by like the stack of papers that, show I've pushed a lot of papers around, and you can't point to that impact and you can't point to the relationships you've built and how processes have changed on the front lines, well, then you're just in an extremely vulnerable position. And that's why I think conversations like this are important. Following folks like you are important because, again, it starts with our mindset and our mentality. If our goal is to become a compliance executive, well, then we're focused on the business. If you're just going to be stuck as a compliance, analyst, compliance, person, well, then your world is just that compliance department. The compliance department is not the that's one organ in the entire body. We want to optimize the body's performance, right? We want to make our impact felt, and we want to be that circulatory system so that things can run smoothly. On that point, there was a great question that said, hey, when that person's calling you up and you're not hanging the phone up because it's not a compliance issue, but you're lending your help and you're saying, hey, I know how policies work. Would you own that policy? Would you pass that to them? How would that work? I know that's, it's probably nuanced depending on the situation.
No, I would not own the policy because you don't want everything to be a compliance policy because if someone violates a policy that's a compliance policy, it means something really big, right? On the flip side of it, if somebody else has the policy, it should be a standard, an SOP. So I would actually facilitate because we know how to draft policies and help them create a policy that works for them. So I would give it back to them, but I would help them facilitate it. We are so fortunate as compliance officers to be granted the ability to manage a company program like the compliance program. And so we are so fortunate to be the stewards of that program. It's not our program, it's the company's program. So the more that we can do to collaborate with everybody else, other departments, the better off we're going to be and the better off the program is going to be. So don't ever make something yours just because you think you want it, like a policy. Make it theirs, but help them be the facilitator, to help them be successful and let them do their job. The more you can let the other departments be successful with your assistance, the better off we're going to be as compliance individuals.
I mean, compliance doesn't win unless the business wins.
Exactly.
You know, if these other departments aren't winning, then what's the point? You know, man, this was phenomenal. Let's have a round of applause for Ross. I want you guys to go on the side here. There should be a link to his LinkedIn. Absolutely follow him. Go on wherever you listen to your podcast and subscribe to his podcast, and also follow his company because they put up a ton of clips as well. And, you know, again, we want to get our certifications. We want to show our sort of outward commitment to this industry, but where the rubber meets the road and where the impact is really felt is when our mindset, when we're obsessed with adding more value to our organization. So we got to be a sponge. We have to continue to sharpen our sword if we're ever going to elevate compliance. I mean, the next 10 years here is going to look way different than the last 10 years. This is a very exciting time to be alive. So hope you guys enjoyed today. This is going to be the first of many healthcare focused episodes of the Ethicsverse. Also join us Thursday. We have Amy Bernard Bond. We're going to be talking about delivering bad news as a superpower. So that's going to be great. And hope all of you guys can come to our cocktail party and swing by the booth and get a book if you're coming to CEI. With that, we'll see you guys next Thursday. See ya.